Welcome to Insight Meditation Community of Charlotte. Please look around the room, see who's here tonight. Greet your Sangha mates, old and new faces. Hey, Zoomers. Hey. So it got dark so early tonight. It really, daylight savings always throws me for a loop. So an old adage that you may have heard is, in this life, pain is unavoidable, but suffering is optional. The Buddha's teachings on the Four Noble Truths culminate in a path of actions that show us how to do just that, how to make suffering in our life optional. So we're currently studying this 8-part path in its 3 divisions, which are called the 3-part training. The training usually begins with ethical behavior, but can begin almost anywhere. The Buddha himself is reported to have answered a question about how to sum up the training in brief. He recommended starting with the wholesome states, including right view. And when moral discipline was purified and the view was straight, follow that with the study of the foundations of mindfulness. That's from the Samyutta Nikaya. And so those specific behaviors, if you missed last week, are what we studied with Larry last week, and that can be found on YouTube. Anytime you miss a talk, we actually have a YouTube channel that John is doing a great job uploading and editing. So all these ethical behaviors point us towards non-harming, towards creating safety with each other and peace for ourselves and for others. And this is the reason that we usually take the precepts when we go into a residential retreat like we'll be doing in April of next year. So we can go into the practice of meditation in a container that feels safe and respectful. And we know that ethical behavior has been agreed on for everybody there. So that's where we begin. But our topic for the evening is another sector of the path. The part that we're looking at tonight is called Samadhi, or mind training. And so that's what we just did for 30 minutes, was we practiced some mind training. And this is sometimes translated as concentration. But tonight, let's unpack Samadhi and see how much of this you recognize, that maybe you just did some of it, and how much you may not recognize. The literal translation of Samadhi is to direct together. And this brings to my mind a great composer directing an orchestra, making layers of complex and sublime sound. And so when we practice the constituent parts of mind training or Samadhi, we can nurture an investigative and a luminous mind, one that is equanimous and aware, and we can experience some sublime states. In yogic and Buddhist traditions, this is known as attaining the meditative absorptions. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Please take a look at the handouts that are scattered throughout the room tonight. If you have one and your neighbor does not, please share. And for those on Zoom, it's a simple chart of the Noble Eightfold Path. I cannot screen share it, but I can send you one later if you're interested. So we see the fourth noble truth, which is the Eightfold Path. And we see the 3 trainings broken down here. We see ethical behavior, or sila. We see mind training, or samadhi. And we see wisdom, or panya. And we should know that when we practice, we weave in and out of all these on a daily basis when we meditate and practice mindfulness. And often what we most need is exactly what presents itself in our meditation. So how do we remember yet another list? Here's 8 more things. In just a few minutes, at the end of this talk, I'll share an acronym that works for me, and maybe it'll help you remember the 8 parts of this path, this beautiful path to the end of suffering. So for now, let's simply start at the beginning of mind training. If you'll look at Samadhi, Samadhi is an umbrella term, and it includes the practices of right effort or skillful effort. I also call this energy, of right mindfulness, and of right concentration. So those are the 3 things that we work with whenever we meditate, whether we realize it or not. Each of these 3 practices contributes to the culmination of a still mind, a discerning and a concentrated mind, where we can be unified, collected, and serene. It sounds so nice, doesn't it? Particularly when we've had a frazzled day, to be able to find a quiet spot, to sit still and summon just enough energy to be present to ourselves, to our current situation, to let everything happen just as it is, to essentially relinquish control or the imagined control, and not be caught in our thoughts and our plans and the drama of life. This is the practice that brings freedom. A deep, focused calm comes about when 3 aspects of mind training or the practice are undertaken consistently, usually daily or almost daily. Again, right effort or energy, right mindfulness, and right concentration. When we commit to regular mind training practice, at some point we come to know calm as our friend, as one of our dependable states of being, often even in the midst of turmoil or calamity, or even during family gatherings during the holiday season. Another interesting side note is that current science is showing that a habit of quiet mindfulness for even 1 minute regularly, that means every day, can have a positive, measurable effect on our sense of calm and well-being. So take note that although longer meditations are of great benefit if you're a serious student of meditation, consistency has actually been found to be just as important, if not more important, than the length of your practice. So that helps me when I get off track and I only have 5 minutes. I just think 5 minutes counts. It's good enough. This is a cumulative practice. It has to be repeated as often as possible. Now, tonight, as we explore the first part of Samadhi, which is skillful or right effort, and the energy related to our meditation practice, we'll easily notice the need to increase effort to bring beneficial or wholesome thoughts to the forefront by using behaviors like mindfulness of breathing, which we may have just practiced, body scanning, or the metta practice. And we use that same right effort to discourage or decrease the thoughts that incline us towards harmful or unwholesome behaviors or just waste our time. Things like ill will or jealousy or daydreaming or sensual desire, or dreaming about food or having doubt or feeling restlessness. All of these are the known hindrances to meditation, and we use right effort to see those, to investigate those, and to stop them in their tracks. If we've lived long enough, we find that it's sometimes easier to embrace the things that are not particularly healthy. These things trace back to what the Buddha calls the 3 poisons of greed, ill will, and ignorance or delusion. So right effort tells us how to direct our efforts, how to encourage beneficial thoughts, behaviors, and how to discourage unwholesome thoughts or behaviors. This is one reason Sangha is so very important. We need these folks around us who are engaged in similar struggles and choices, who are inclined in similar ways as we are, pointed towards the end of suffering. So the right effort or energy practice is kind of like a gatekeeper in our practice, letting in the wholesome and sustaining it, discouraging the unwholesome and ceasing to entertain it. The Dharma lists many ways to discourage the unwholesome, but that is a whole talk unto itself. I will tell you that Shayla Catherine has a new book out called Beyond Distraction, and she puts a whole chapter in here about how to discourage distractions. So right effort couples with the next practice on the list, right mindfulness. Now we become even more discerning with managing our mental energy, and we look at the foundations of right mindfulness. The Buddha thought this was so important that he declared the four foundations of mindfulness as the direct path to nibbana. He said we could directly extinguish suffering if we were to practice this diligently. And he went through a whole list of, for months, for weeks, even for days, if we could just focus, completely on the four foundations of mindfulness, we could end our suffering. So this is found in the Satipatthana Sutta. The four foundations are the mindfulness of body. We work with that every time we practice breathing or body scanning, but it also includes contemplations of all the body parts and the charnel ground meditations or the cemetery meditations where the monks go and into the cemetery and think about the body as it decays and dies and falls apart. A second mindfulness is mindfulness of feelings. This is a very interesting one to me because this is called Vedana or feeling tones, and it includes all kinds of things, emotions and sensations and opinions. And if we really pay attention here, we see that this is constantly shifting and coming and going and affecting us, how we behave and literally how we feel and act. So this is where we learn to respond instead of react, is mindfulness of feeling tones. The third foundation of mindfulness practice is mindfulness of mind. Here we learn how the mind actually works. We begin to trace our thoughts. We notice what leads to happiness, what is temporary happiness, what's lasting. We can, to some degree, be in control of our thinking. We notice pleasant, unpleasant, and neutral here. And the way it occurs all day, every day, just bombarding. If you really stop and pay attention, you can see it's just a river of pleasant, unpleasant, and neutral coming and going in the mind all day. And we learn to feel some equanimity, possibly, as we see that this is just, sitting in a flowing river of all of these thoughts that just generate on their own. So the mindfulness of mind is where I like to say we take our sovereign seat. When I first discovered that I could control my thinking, that I was the one choosing which thoughts and energies to nurture and which ones I could ignore or redirect, and I could even see thoughts unfurling, I really felt I was getting somewhere. I definitely felt a little more in charge of my quote unquote self. The fourth mindfulness is mindfulness of dhammas. This is a beautiful directed mindfulness that begins to understand more deeply the hindrances to meditation. We get to understand the clinging that gets us all into trouble pretty much every day. Understand the sense doors, the things that call to us, that want us to listen or taste or see, and how the arising of the sense pleasures works. We see the factors of enlightenment in this particular mindfulness of dhammas, and we feel into the inherent truth of suffering as we begin to understand our cravings and aversions and how they're present all the time, every day. These are the reasons that a Dharma-informed mindfulness practice is, in my humble opinion, one of the most important things we can learn as a human being, because this is how we dispel ignorance. If we don't know, we simply don't know. But when we do know, we can open the door to wisdom and freedom of heart and mind. So actually, I wish I could stop there, but there's one more piece in Samadhi, and that is right concentration. So we use concentration to sustain present moment mindful awareness every time we meditate. And possibly we begin to experience successively deeper and longer meditative states. There are a series of 4 meditative states called the jhanas that involve a very deep meditation, a very deep concentration. The prerequisites for these involve first clearing the mind of the hindrances to meditation, coming into complete stillness in the mind and the body, into equanimity, tranquility, and one-pointedness. This concentrated mind has great dynamic powers. Some of our teachers have written about and exhibited some of these interesting powers. However, the Buddha warns us not to get enamored with these states and certainly not to clamor after them. Bhante Ji writes about the Buddha comparing this clamoring to a cow who is not yet familiar with her own beautiful pasture. And she sets out to explore more new and better pastures, and then gets lost in the mountains without food or water and cannot find her way back home. So he seems to be saying that we can get lost if we go after these deeper states too soon. Don't chase after a new high, clinging again to the ideas of the jhanas. Simply and patiently, we train the mind using the skills of right energy and right mindfulness to remember how we got to the deeper levels. It's like dropping breadcrumbs. You can sometimes trace back. I was thinking this, and then I did this, and then that happened. And it's really interesting to be able to trace your way back and see how you ended up in that state of concentration. I also think it's good, instead of going on your own into these states, to consult with teachers who consistently experience these states, jhanic states, and write in detail and teach about them. Bhikkhu Analayo is one of these teachers, and Shayla Catherine is one of these teachers, who she's a little more accessible than Bhikkhu Analayo. But there's also teachings about the jhanas in this book, 8 Mindful Steps to Happiness, which is this one by Bhante Gunaratana. Did you guys see that? And also this book, you guys have probably seen this 100 times. If you don't have it, you need to have it. This is the Noble Eightfold Path by Bhikkhu Bodhi. And so there's lots about the jhana states in there. It's pretty interesting stuff. Bhante Gunaratana says, every time we meditate, we're gaining concentration. So don't feel discouraged if you're not attaining full concentration. It can take years of daily practice to experience a completely immersed and concentrated state. I'd like to add here that multi-day retreats of 10 days or more are a perfect environment for this deep concentration to come about. And you usually have a teacher right there that you can check in with if things get, weird. Gunaratana goes on to say, if our practice of awareness is guided by the tools of energy, and right mindfulness, we can be content whether we're fully immersed in concentration or not. How long attaining the concentrated states takes depends on how often we meditate and how well we practice the other steps of the path. To end our exploration of Samadhi tonight, we can know that our conscious heart and mind are the most precious tools we use to make all choices and decisions, to form and sustain relationships, and to craft a satisfying life for ourselves. Mind and heart training is a very, very valuable tool to acquire. and coupled with ethical behavior and wisdom, invariably results in greater, deeper, lasting happiness and diminished suffering. So maybe that old adage is true after all. Pain is inevitable, but with the right tools and practice, suffering seems to be completely optional. May that be so for each of us.